Hi folks, tips on buying raw material. When you submit an RFQ, you've got to include the basics. So say I want quantity 20, what's the dimensional size of the material, what material, and then the condition. This is really important and you want to specify this up front. We like to use the phrase that must be deep, scratch, and dent free. They won't sell you something that's absolutely perfect and mirror. It's going to have some minor stuff from handling, but nevertheless, putting that on there helps. So one of our vendors calls this manifold grade, just a term that we've come across. Absolutely should price compare. We tend to send our RFQs out to just 2 vendors, but prices will fluctuate and change. Metal markets do move a lot, and different vendors have different pricing tiers and react differently to those markets. Lead time is also something you should be asking for. One of our vendors tends to ship within 1 or 2 days, the other up to 5 days. Request mill certificates. This is optional, but what that does is it gives you some specifications and paperwork behind who made this material. If it was an aluminum, who was the original foundry or smelting, and where did that material come from? What are its QC sheets? For us, this is important, especially when we want to make sure we're ordering US sourced material. We've heard of some other stories of acquaintances who have really struggled with tolerances or surface finishes. It was what you would think of as normal aluminum, inspect perhaps as say 6061 T6, was not the same quality. We order almost all of our material now as saw cut or cut to size. We have them place it on a pallet. We specify that. And then it's delivered to us on a pallet, saw cut, and we literally wheel it up to the machine and start working on it. If you're going to have it saw cut, include a tolerance. And we like to keep Kanban cards or notepad files that we can use to basically copy and paste into the RFQ. It saves us from having to retype, and it saves us from that stress of being uncertain of what were the specifics. So this is an example. We'll put this on the web page. In this case, we're ordering 20. That's the dimension, and then plus 1/8 of an inch minus 0 on the saw cut length. The other thing you can do is consider tracking the price per pound. It can be helpful to know, and that's how the metals world works, is they quote largely on price per pound. The more you buy, the better price you get, but it can be helpful to know, was I paying $2.20 a pound for aluminum, or for some reason I'm paying $3.50 a pound? We've actually caught some mistakes before because we try to keep track of their general price per pound. Quality and material details. This gets into some of the more nitty-gritty, but extrusion is not perfect stuff. But when extrusion goes through its extrusion die, it has stresses in it that can cause it to bow or warp, especially thinner material that's wider. And extrusion dies will change and wear over time. They have an operating range. So just know that the material you get on day one might be slightly different by just a few thousandths of an inch if you order the same material a year later. Bar versus plate. So bar would be, think of your stick of chewing gum, that sort of a shape. They're often for aluminum in 12-foot and steel 20-foot lengths. But you can also have material cut out of plate. And what that means is think a giant tabletop where they actually saw cut all 4 edges for you instead of with a bar where you're able to usually just saw cut the 1 edge. You'll want to talk to your inside sales rep about bow and flatness. Most places won't give you any guarantee there, but it's worth understanding what is the specification, and especially before and after that material is cut. Going upstream to the manufacturers of the material, that's not who we buy it from. We buy it through a wholesaler or a distributor. They might quote some sort of a spec, but that spec is nullified after you have started working on it, whether that's you machining it or whether it's your metals vendor cutting it for you. And then again, we have generally gone with US sourced or US manufactured material because it saved us headaches and it's just worth it. We don't stock very much inventory anymore for a few reasons. It's expensive to store material, it's difficult to keep track of what you have, and most importantly, we can usually get material the next day, especially if it's not being saw cut or processed. And for us, our vendors will either deliver it for free or for a very low fee. In one case, it's $8 delivery charge, and that includes a semi-truck coming to our shop. Again, if I order at 4 or 5 o'clock on one evening, that's the next morning. That's very dependent on where you are. You know, we're here in Zanesville, Ohio. The trucks are coming from Columbus, about an hour away. If you live 3 hours from the nearest city, that may not be possible. Again, we ask them when it's saw cut to deliver it on a skid or pallet. If it's bar, and especially if it's something that we want kept really well, we can ask them to bundle it with a piece of wood or sandwich wrapped around it. That can help keep it nicely. Because you've got to remember, the sales rep that you're talking to on the phone, who may be a good person, they're not the one that's out there at the factory floor, pulling it off the rack, processing it, picking it up, putting it on the truck person drives it to your shop. In our experience, it's not uncommon, unfortunately, for that material to have some heavy handling. So taking measures upstream or in your quote to protect it really helps. Make sure you mention if you have receiving hours. If you don't want to receive or you can't receive material, say after 3 or 4 o'clock, let them know that. And some places may have a local pickup option where you would be able to drive there with your truck or vehicle and pick up the material when it's ready. When it comes to the vendors and the relationships, talk to them about what's a win-win. Talk to about what you think you're going to be able to do for estimated annual sales volume. Start to get to know them. It absolutely helps. You may have inside and outside sales reps or sales folks, or you may have somebody like an account manager. For us, we generally deal with on a day-to-day basis our inside sales rep. So that's the person that we are emailing orders to or calling up for quick questions. They are generally a little bit more rigid in what they're able to do. And so it's usually our outside rep or our account manager who is not the person we talk to every day, but if we have a problem or we have a bigger picture question, say we're trying to get our pricing better overall, or we're not happy with our experience for some reason, that's the kind of person that we deal with on those issues. Payment terms, oftentimes you'll get 0.5% if you pay within the first 10 days. That's called half 10. That usually shows up as percent 0.5, net 10, or net 30 on an invoice, which means if you pay within the first 10 days, you get 0.5% off your invoice. You need to take that off yourself. That's not calculated for you. And it's easy to forget to do that. Otherwise, you're owed in net 30. We have made it a habit of trying to pay our vendors relatively quickly, and it does not go unnoticed. So many folks in this world get run onto net 60 or net 90 or even worse. And so when we can, and we can afford to, from a working capital standpoint, we have found that paying our vendors quickly helps you stand out as an excellent customer. And so the few times that we have had problems or we aren't happy with something, we've had a great experience with them. And one of the easiest things to say is, hey, we love working with you. We're a great customer. We pay our bills right away, but I need your help on this. And that's a good segue into viewing it as a relationship. It's not just us buying from them. We're leveraging their industry knowledge, their resources on how we can help run our shop, what materials that we can use, how we can get it handled quickly, how we can get it processed well. It's a very helpful thing to have as a two-way street. And don't hesitate to ask questions. We've often found they don't like to give certain specific answers because they can't represent themselves as, say, metallurgists or folks that can give you product recommendations, but they can help you understand, hey, what are the differences in these materials? Or if I'm looking for something like 8620, but I don't like this, is there a substitute steel that would offer a similar version? And finally, get a copy of their book. It's actually really helpful to be able to flip through a book to look at all of the different products that they offer, as well as read the descriptions about those materials.